What if I told you that the greatest love stories captured in old portraits were just the greatest deception of their time? We are used to looking at black and white photographs of Victorian couples and seeing in them a model of stability, fidelity, and quiet family happiness. However, behind the tightly drawn velvet curtains lay a completely different reality, full of coldness and loneliness. These magnificent mansions, which we admire today, were often not cozy nests, but golden cages for their inhabitants. The external glitter of diamonds and the rustle of expensive silks drowned out the quiet moans of despair that dared not escape. Reputation in that era was valued above human life, and the appearance of prosperity was more important than happiness itself. The women of that era played their roles masterfully, taking the secrets of broken hearts with them to the grave. Watch the video to the end, and you will learn how the impeccable facade of a successful marriage broke destinies more than any open tragedy. Are you ready to learn the truth about how these perfect families were actually created? In the Gilded Age, marriage was rarely a union of two loving hearts. Rather, it resembled a merger of two large corporations. The feelings of young people, especially girls, were not taken into account when the merger of capital or the acquisition of a title was at stake. Parents carefully selected partners, studying bank accounts and family trees with the same attention that bankers study stock market reports. It was a cold, calculated transaction where the beauty and youth of the bride were exchanged for the stability and status of the groom. From an early age, girls were prepared for the fact that their main purpose was to become a worthy adornment to the living room of an influential husband. They were taught that love was a pleasant but completely optional bonus that might come with time or might not come at all. Romantic dreams drawn from books were shattered by the harsh reality of marriage contracts, which even specified amounts for pocket money. Often, the bride and groom barely knew each other before the wedding, meeting only at official receptions under strict supervision. Their first real conversations took place when there was no turning back and the ring was already on their finger. The wealth of the bride's family was often used to patch up the budget of an impoverished aristocrat who in return offered a famous surname. Such unions, called exchanging dollars for titles, looked brilliant in the society columns, but were empty inside. In this scheme, the woman was an expensive trophy that had to be profitably displayed to society. Her opinion about her future spouse was considered a whim that did not deserve serious attention from the older men of the family. The wedding day itself turned into a grand spectacle, where every gesture and glance was rehearsed for the public. Newspapers enthusiastically described the lace on the dress and the cost of the gifts, creating the illusion of a fairy tale come true. But beneath the heavy veil were often eyes full of tears and fear of the unknown. The bride understood that after the ceremony, she would no longer belong to herself but would become the property of her husband. Entering a new home did not mean the beginning of a new life, but rather taking on the role of guardian of someone else's hearth. She was expected to immediately meet the high standards set by generations of her husband's ancestors. Any deviation from the norm was perceived as a personal insult to the family's reputation and was severely punished. A woman had to learn to wear a mask of contentment, even if her soul was screaming in pain. Society applauded these unions, calling them brilliant matches and holding them up as examples to others. No one wanted to look behind the scenes and see the price paid by the participants in this spectacle. The illusion of happiness was so convincing that even the spouses themselves began to believe in it over time. Or at least they pretended to believe in order not to go mad with longing. Do you agree that a marriage of convenience can be stronger than a marriage of love? Please tell us what you think about this. Every opinion is valuable. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories. Guess how long it took for the young wife to realize the full weight of her golden cage? Usually the illusions dissipated in the first weeks after the honeymoon, when the gray everyday life began. A woman who became the mistress of a huge estate suddenly discovered that she had no real power even over her own schedule. Her day was planned down to the minute: visits, orders to the servants, fittings, and endless changes of clothes. Her every action was controlled by strict etiquette, and any deviation from it was punished by condemnation from society. The house, which was supposed to be her fortress, turned into a complex mechanism that required constant supervision and management. She had to manage a staff of servants who often knew the master's habits better than she did. Housekeepers and butlers often looked down on the new mistress, sabotaging her timid attempts to impose her own rules. Instead of comfort, she encountered a cold wall of traditions that could not be changed. The huge halls of the mansions were designed for receptions and balls, not for real human life. On ordinary days, these spaces were oppressive in their emptiness and echoing silence, broken only by the striking of the clock. A woman could wander for hours through the enfilades of rooms without meeting a single soul. Her husband was often away on business or politics, and his return home was a formality. Lunches and dinners turned into solemn rituals, where even when alone, the spouses sat at opposite ends of a long table. Conversation was kept neutral so as not to disturb digestion or cause unnecessary emotions. Sincerity was forbidden, as showing feelings was considered a sign of bad taste and weakness. The wife had to smile and listen, hiding her boredom and inner emptiness. Her relationship with her husband often boiled down to polite coolness in discussing plans for the coming season. He saw her only as a function necessary to maintain his status, not as a living person. Her dreams, fears, and hopes remained a closed book to him, one he had no desire to read. And so they lived, two strangers under one roof, bound only by a common name. Women learned to find small joys in embroidery, reading novels, or writing letters to friends. These were tiny islands of freedom in an ocean of regimented and boring life. But even in letters, they rarely dared to complain, fearing that their words would become known. Society's censorship was both internal and external, forcing them to remain silent about the most important things. In the next chapter, you will learn a secret that forever changed the perception of what personal space means in marriage. Want to know a secret that will change your view of the layout of old mansions? The architecture of houses at that time was specifically designed to separate spouses as much as possible in their daily lives. This was not an accident or a fashion whim. It was the physical realization of social distance within the family. The husband and wife's bedrooms were often not just in different rooms, but in different wings of the house. Between them lay long corridors, halls, and staircases, which took quite a journey to traverse. This separation was explained by a desire for peace and comfort, but in reality, it cemented an emotional divide. Spouses could go days without seeing each other, living in the same house, if they did not have any planned joint activities. Each had their own staff, their own entrance, their own living rooms, and their own offices. Their lives ran parallel, intersecting only at strictly designated times for official meals. The bedroom doors were heavy, made of oak, with secure locks symbolizing the inviolability of personal boundaries. Knocking on your spouse's door without warning was considered the height of impropriety and a breach of etiquette. Even for intimate closeness, a specific schedule or formal invitation was required, devoid of spontaneity. This killed any possibility of genuine, warm affection and trust. The interiors of women's rooms were overloaded with details, fabrics, and furniture, creating a stuffy, closed atmosphere. Windows were often covered with heavy curtains that let in little light to protect the furniture from fading. In this dim light, women, deprived of the right to be active, spent the best years of their lives. They were like rare flowers in a greenhouse, beautiful but isolated from the real world. The male half of the house, on the other hand, was austere, dark, and functional, designed for business meetings. Women had no business there. Their appearance in their husbands' offices was perceived as an intrusion. These were two different worlds, two different planets that had mistakenly ended up under the same roof. And the larger the house, the deeper the gap between its inhabitants became. Thus, brick and stone, velvet and wood became accomplices in the great silence that reigned in these families. The houses were magnificent on the outside, but inside they were cold crypts for living emotions. And the more luxurious the facade, the thicker the walls separating the two solitudes. It was the art of living together while remaining complete strangers, brought to perfection. Like this if you are also struck by how the environment can affect human relationships. What if I showed you a time machine that would take us back to the most intimate moments of their lives, where deafening silence reigned? The worst enemy of women in golden cages was not cruelty, but indifference and a complete lack of dialogue. Their husbands often believed that women's minds were incapable of understanding serious issues of business or politics. Therefore, conversations with their wives were limited to discussing the weather, menus, and gossip, which made their jaws drop. Women felt that they were not being heard, that their opinions had no weight or significance. Attempts to talk about their experiences or concerns were met with a wall of incomprehension or cold politeness. "Don't fill your pretty head with nonsense," was the standard response that many heard. This disregard was more painful than outright rudeness because it devalued the woman's very personality. She was turned into a beautiful piece of furniture that was supposed to please the eye, but not make any unnecessary noise. The diaries of that era are full of entries screaming about loneliness and the desire to be understood by someone, anyone. Women confided in paper what they could not say to their lawful spouses sitting in the next room. The pages bore traces of tears, confessions of anguish, and dreams of another fuller life. But these diaries were often burned or hidden away so as not to destroy the ideal image of the family. Sometimes this silence was broken only by the sounds of the piano, which the woman played for hours. Music became the only legal way to express accumulated emotions and pain. In stormy passages and sad melodies, everything that was forbidden to say aloud was poured out. Husbands listened to these concerts, nodded their heads, but rarely heard the true message hidden in the notes. There were cases when women began to talk to themselves or their pets. This was considered a cute eccentricity, but in reality it was a sign of a deep psychological crisis. People need communication and response, without which the soul begins to wither. But in the world of Victorian glamour, response was a luxury unavailable even to the richest. So the years passed, turning into decades of silent coexistence between two strangers. What do you think is worse, open quarrels or such icy silence? In the next chapter, you will learn how the medicine of the time became another tool of oppression. Medicine at the end of the 19th century often became not a salvation, but another tool for controlling women. Any manifestation of discontent, sadness, or desire for independence could be interpreted as a symptom of illness. The diagnosis of hysteria was made with frightening ease to women who were simply suffocating within the confines of their lives. Instead of listening and understanding the cause of emotional pain, doctors offered to suppress it with medical methods. A popular treatment was so-called rest, which involved completely isolating the patient from the outside world. The woman was put to bed and forbidden to read, write, sew, or even talk. She was instructed to stare at the ceiling for hours and drink milk to calm her frayed nerves. It was a real torture of idleness, which often led to real, not imaginary, madness. It was believed that any intellectual activity was harmful to the fragile female body and psyche. Doctors convinced husbands that books and education were the main enemies of women's health and family happiness. Men readily accepted this point of view, as it scientifically justified the need for control. Thus, women were deprived of their last outlets, turning into passive bodies in need of care. Opiates and sedatives were prescribed generously, turning women into dependent shadows. Laudanum, a popular opium tincture, was in the medicine cabinet of almost every self-respecting lady. It helped them endure boredom, drown out melancholy, and make their days resemble a hazy dream. Many great society ladies were quiet drug addicts whose addictions society preferred to ignore. The psychology of the time ignored women's personalities, reducing all their experiences to physiology. Emotional outbursts were explained away as wandering wombs or weak constitutions, but never as a result of living conditions. No one wanted to admit that the gilded cage itself was the cause of the illness. It was easier for the system to declare a woman sick than to admit that society was unjust. These medical myths crippled the lives of millions of women, depriving them of their right to a voice in their feelings. They lived with the stigma of being nervous and weak, when in fact they possessed enormous inner strength. Strength that was spent simply on surviving in a world that denied them sanity. In the next chapter, you will learn about the double standards that prevailed behind closed bedroom doors. What if I told you that fidelity in those days was a one-sided and extremely selective concept? While women were expected to be crystal clear and absolutely devoted, men were forgiven for a great deal. Society tacitly recognized a man's right to little weaknesses and entertainment on the side. Having a mistress, especially from the world of theater or the demi-monde, was considered almost normal for a gentleman. The main rule was to maintain outward appearances. Sin was permissible as long as it did not become a public scandal. Wives often knew about their husbands' escapades, finding irrefutable evidence, or hearing whispers behind their backs. But they were forced to remain silent and pretend that nothing was happening in order to save face. To make a scene of jealousy meant admitting defeat and exposing the family to ridicule. The wisdom of women of that era lay in their ability to turn a blind eye to the obvious and endure humiliation with a smile. A man could spend his evenings in clubs, visit dubious establishments, and return in the early hours of the morning. His wife had to wait for him at home, impeccably dressed and ready to serve tea if he so desired. She was taught that male nature was polygamous and required variety, while female nature was monogamous and self-sacrificing. This injustice was woven into the cultural code and supported even by the church and literature. Sometimes, in rare cases, discreet affairs were tolerated among married women in high society, but only if they were kept strictly secret. But it was a dangerous game in which women risked everything and men risked almost nothing. Most preferred to sublimate their feelings into charity or religion without risking their status. Hearts were locked away, the keys thrown into the deep well of social norms. This double standard poisoned relationships, turning them into a farce and mutual hypocrisy. Husbands bought expiatory gifts, necklaces and bracelets, after every major betrayal. Wives accepted these gifts with cold dignity, knowing the true price of these sparkling stones. Diamonds became a symbol of tears frozen in a precious setting, beautiful and cold. And so they lived, he in pursuit of pleasure, she in an ivory tower, guarding a hearth that had long since gone out. Do you think society has now completely rid itself of such double standards? In the next chapter, you will learn how clothing became a real instrument of torture. The fashion of the Gilded Age was visually stunning, but merciless to those who wore it. Women's clothing at that time was a complex engineering feat, sometimes weighing up to 10 to 15 kilograms. The basis of it all was a corset that tightly cinched the waist and deformed the internal organs for the sake of a fashionable silhouette. Women voluntarily locked themselves into these armors to conform to the hourglass standard of beauty. The process of getting dressed took hours and required the help of at least one, if not two, maids. It was physically impossible to put on the multi-layered skirts, bustles, and bodices by oneself. This further emphasized the dependent position of women and their inability to even manage their own clothing. They were dolls that others dressed, turning and tightening the lacing until their ribs cracked. It was extremely difficult to move in such an outfit. Steps had to be small, gestures restrained. Raising your arms, bending over quickly, or running was not only indecent, but also technically difficult. Clothing dictated behavior, making women slow, majestic, and completely passive. They could not actively interact with the world. They could only be present in it as decoration. The fabrics were dense and heavy, velvet, brocade, satin, richly decorated with embroidery and beads. In summer, such dresses were unbearably hot, and in winter they did not always protect against the bitter cold. But comfort was never a priority in fashion. The main thing was to impress with wealth and status. Women literally wore their husbands' fortunes on their backs, demonstrating their financial solvency. Clothing also served as protective armor, concealing true feelings and the condition of the body. Under layers of lace and corsets, pregnancy, illness, or exhaustion could be hidden. The facade remained flawless, even if everything inside was falling apart and aching. Women were packed into a case, beautiful and rigid, which shaped their bodies and souls. This daily feat of carrying heavy loads was taken for granted, as a natural female duty. No one thought about the physical discomfort behind this elegance. Beauty demanded sacrifices, and women made these sacrifices on the altar of public opinion every day. Social life was not entertainment, but hard work that required constant tension and self-control. Balls, receptions, and dinner parties were the stage on which an endless performance of prosperity was played out. Women were the leading actresses in this production, and the reputation of the entire family depended on their performance. A mistaken etiquette, an incorrect curtsy, or an unfortunate phrase could cost their husbands their careers and their daughters their futures. Every public appearance was an exam taken by the strictest jury, other women from high society. They evaluated everything, from the sparkle of diamonds to the freshness of the complexion and the sincerity of the smile. Envy and competition were the hidden drivers of this world, disguised as friendship and kindness. It took nerves of steel to withstand these appraising glances and not break down. A smile was a mandatory part of the uniform, a mask that was put on before leaving the bedroom. It didn't matter what was going on at home, whether you had a headache or a broken heart. At the ball, you had to shine. Complaining about life was considered bad form, a sign of weakness and an inability to control yourself. Keep your back straight. Girls heard this phrase from childhood, and it applied to more than just posture. Social success was a drug that replaced real happiness and gave the illusion of significance. If you were invited to the Astors or the Vanderbilts, it meant you existed, you were worth something. Being excluded from the guest list was tantamount to social death, which was feared more than physical death. Therefore, women fought for their place in this theater with the desperation of drowning people. Behind the scenes of this glamour often lay debts, intrigues, and hatred for best friends. But on the surface, everything looked like a perfect picture, full of grace, charm, and mutual respect. History remembered this glamour, but forgot how much effort it took to maintain it. It was a triumph of form over substance, of appearance over essence. This was how life went on, in constant fear of taking a wrong step, and in a constant pursuit of the crowd's approval. Divorce at the end of the 19th century was not just a legal procedure, but a catastrophe that destroyed lives. For a woman, deciding to break up a marriage meant voluntarily signing her own social death warrant. Society did not forgive those who dared to break the sacred bonds, no matter how unbearable they were. A divorced woman instantly became an outcast. She was no longer welcome in respectable homes, and her old friends turned their backs on her. The laws were written by men and for men, making the divorce process extremely difficult and humiliating for the wife. To gain freedom, it was necessary to prove her husband's infidelity, aggravated by cruelty or desertion. Simple infidelity was often not enough. The courts demanded sordid details and public testimony. This turned personal drama into a farce, eagerly followed by journalists and gossip mongers. Moreover, in a divorce, a woman risked losing the most precious things in her life, her children and her livelihood. Children were considered the property of their father, and the court almost always left them with the man, depriving the mother of her rights. The prospect of never seeing their sons and daughters again kept many women from taking this fateful step. They chose to endure humiliation and coldness just to stay close to their children. The church also stood guard over the sanctity of marriage, instilling in women the idea that patience was a virtue. Suffering in marriage was presented as a cross that must be borne with humility for the sake of salvation. Priests persuaded wives to return to their tyrannical husbands and pray for their reform. The spiritual pressure was no less intense than the social or economic pressure. The few who did decide to divorce often left for Europe or lived in seclusion, far from the spotlight. Their names were crossed out of guest books, and people tried not to mention them in conversation, as if they had died. It was a high price to pay for freedom, to become invisible in a world where you once shone. Escaping from the golden cage was almost impossible because the bars of that cage were forged from laws, morals, and money. And most captives preferred to decorate their prison rather than try to destroy it. What do you think was more difficult, to stay and suffer or to leave and lose everything? When we look at the history of the Gilded Age, we see palaces, dresses, and guest lists, but we don't see tears. This is because the women of that era were masters at covering up their pain. Personal archives were carefully cleaned, compromising letters were burned in fireplaces, and diaries were destroyed before death. They did not want their descendants to pity or condemn them. They wanted to be remembered as flawless. Pride prevented them from airing their dirty laundry and leaving documentary evidence of their misfortune. They created a legend about their lives, editing reality to suit a beautiful picture. This is why it is so difficult for historians to reconstruct the true feelings and experiences of women of that time. We are forced to read between the lines, catch hints in correspondence, and peer into the sad eyes in portraits. This culture of silence was passed down from generation to generation, from mother to daughter, as a valuable skill. Suffer and smile. This unspoken motto was the main lesson that young ladies learned. Women learned to be strong by denying their weaknesses and needs. This created a generation of iron ladies in velvet gloves, unyielding but deeply lonely inside. Today, we can only guess what they dreamed of as they looked out the windows of their luxurious bedrooms. Perhaps about a simple walk without an escort, a heart-to-heart conversation, or the right to be themselves. Their dreams disappeared with them, dissolved in time, leaving us only beautiful shells. But it is precisely the understanding of this hidden side of history that makes their images alive and close to us. We must remember them not as faceless mannequins in historical costumes, but as living women with complex destinies. Their story is a reminder that gold does not always shine with happiness, and silence is not always a sign of consent. It is a lesson for all of us about the importance of sincerity, freedom, and the right to our own feelings. Their voices, silenced during their lifetime, must be heard at least now, a century later. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the past, uncovering secrets behind closed doors. The Gilded Age left us a magnificent legacy, but now we know what was hidden behind its facade. These women lived in a world where appearances were more important than substance, and reputation was more valuable than life itself. Their marriages, which seemed ideal, were often a school of survival and loneliness. But even in these conditions, they found the strength to maintain their dignity and hold their heads high. What other secrets of the past would you like to uncover in our next videos? Write your suggestions in the comments and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on new historical investigations.